Yo, Joe. Talking comics, here's your host. It's A Real American Brian.
All right, so let's get into G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue number 1. And again, I'll be using my custom-bound collection of books to go through all these. So this will be the trade paperbacks, the G.I. Joe classics from IDW, which are the same ones that Marvel put out for the first few volumes. But we get the cover for G.I. Joe number 1. It's become pretty well-known, infamous even amongst at least G.I. Joe collectors, but I think comic collectors in general. And have all the characters jumping off. The Herb Trimpe and Bob McLeod artwork, which is pretty awesome. This was the first comic to be advertised on TV, which was a clever way to get around the toy commercial rules of the time that had a limited amount of how much time you could have showing animated clips. But since comics were protected under the First Amendment, you could have an animated commercial advertising a comic and have the comic just happen to advertise the toy line in its own way. So I think the original plan for this was to be a one-off book, but before it even came out, I think they decided to go ahead and make it a series. But the first issue is a double-sized issue, and it was on Baxter paper, which was a premium paper for the time. And it had no advertising in it other than, well, no traditional advertising. There was some like blueprints for vehicles and things that would get you excited about the toy line that was coming out. The cover price, because it was a double-sided issue on premium paper, it was $1.50, which the normal cover price at that time for a comic was 60 cents. So it was quite a bit more. But I think you got what your money's worth out of it for sure. So then we open it up, and first page, we get a little intro of the team here. Quartered in top-secret armored underground bunkers deep beneath the Armory Chaplain's Assistant School at Fort Wadsworth is America's elite counter-terrorist strike force, codenamed G.I. Joe. The most fearsome rapid deployment team of all stands ready to fight anywhere, anytime, anyway. Pretty awesome introduction to the team, and kind of introducing that there is a secret terrorist strike force, counter-terrorist strike force, which is pretty awesome. The main story in the book is Operation Lady Doomsday. There is a backup story as well. And this was written by Larry Hama, pencils by Herb Trimpe, and ink by Bob McLeod. So this was like a lot of the most well-known creators of the early G.I. Joe books. Herb Trimpe doing the art and Larry, of course, writing. So then we get into a train that's carrying Dr. Burkhart, Lady Doomsday, I guess, but Dr. Burkhart. And the soldiers and the conductors are having a conversation about Dell Burkhart, giving us the background, letting us know that apparently she is claiming that she didn't know the project that she was working on was a Doomsday project, and now she's testifying against the whole thing, basically saying that she was deceived and misled and what the project was actually for. And then within it we get like these secret agent security guards that are with her, and her press conference is beginning, and she's kind of reiterating everything that was said about her, that she was misled in this project and didn't know that this Doomsday project could do such unthinkable things and basically wipe out civilization. Oh, and that is the first appearance of Dr. Burkhart, kind of a smaller secondary character, but there she is. And then right away, as the press conference is going on, we have Cobra attacking the train from the outside, and they are talking amongst themselves, saying, focus on the soldiers. Barroness has things under control on the inside, and we get our first appearance of the Barroness. She pops up in the first issue. Larry has mentioned that a big reason for having her was that all the Cobra characters at that point were all masked. So having one character that was unmasked, he could use her facial reactions to kind of help tell the story, because all the masked characters would make that kind of difficult. And she was not in the figure line at this point in time. She wasn't introduced in the comics as a comic character. And then later, because of her popularity, they made the action figure, and she appeared in the cartoons and became a very big character. But it all started here in the comics. And she has a nice little beauty mark mole here that will disappear pretty quickly, but it's there for now. So she and some of the other Cobra officers or troopers of some kind were hidden amongst the press and had guns disguised as cameras. So they break up the press conference and take Dr. Burkhart hostage. And the Barroness takes her, and they jump out of the train and activate a gas canister that inflates a balloon to take her away. So this gas canister, I mean, this had to be pretty vicious. Some possible spine damage here. Seems like not the greatest idea, but it worked apparently. So they take off, and a helicopter picks them up, and again here they kept the balloon away from the rotors and safely got onto the helicopter. So apparently they know what they're doing. Then we go to the Pentagon as the U.S. is responding to everything that's happening. They have footage of the kidnapping, and they talk about how this is a big problem. The knowledge that Dr. Burkhart has is dangerous, and the secrets that she has, knowing, working through this project and things, they need to get this under control and get things back in order. And this is our first appearance of General Austin and General Flagg, as they're the ones conversing back and forth about this. And then they reveal that there was a note left in the bathroom that Cobra was responsible for this kidnapping. So now they take it to, it becomes even more serious because Cobra has the means and the resources to use the knowledge of Dr. Burkhart to do some really nasty things. So that kind of tells us that Cobra has existed for some time, and the U.S. government has known about Cobra and are, concerned about Cobra having this control. And as they continue talking, Austin and Flagg talk, they talk about how powerful Cobra is and how concerned they are with the whole thing. But General Flagg had a plan all along. He wants to activate the Special Counter-Terrorist Group Delta, codenamed Gijoe. And they open up the dossiers, and this is our first appearance of most of the original 13 plus of the G.I. Joes. So we get Hawk and Grand Slam, Short Fuse, Flash, Grunt, Breaker, Rock and Roll, Zap, Scarlett, Stealer, Clutch, Stalker, Snake Eyes, and then kind of blocked here with a hand, but it's Shooter. Shooter was originally just a joke referencing Jim Shooter, the editor of the book, but would quite a bit later actually be recognized as one of the original G.I. Joes. But at this time that wasn't a plan, it was just kind of put in as a joke. So then Hawk gets his orders to get back to the pit and start getting the Joe team together, and Clutch is driving them to the motor pool. And they pull into the motor pool, and we get the classic everyone calling out each other's names, introducing them. So we have Grand Slam and Zap and Rock and Roll and Stealer, and of course Clutch and Hawk in the vehicle that pulled in. And we get the first kind of look at the pit a little bit here, where inside the motor pool they drop them down through a hydraulic lift. And they go to the combat training center level, which we don't get to see too often. But we get a glimpse of some of the Joes here training and different styles, some hand-to-hand fighting, different weapons things, and then some underwater training of some kind. And, at this point, too, interesting to point out, Hawk is still a colonel at this point, so he has not been promoted yet, but will be over the course of the story here. And then Hawk begins getting the team together, briefing them, and explaining, what's going on with the Burkhart kidnapping and that they've been called in. And they show the hologram of an island in the Caribbean. I don't think they don't call it Cobra Island at this point, so this could just be a completely separate island. I'm not sure if it's ever really named Cobra Island here, but later we will get a Cobra Island, which is pretty awesome. But they have pretty good intelligence on the island, and they know what's going on with it. And there's a full battalion of Cobra troopers and plenty of heavy weaponry, and it's a pretty nasty situation to go into. But Hawk has a plan. He starts putting it together. Grunt, Stalker, and Short Fuse will take out the airfield tower and hangar, leaving one small aircraft intact. Flash and Breaker will take care of the radar mission. Supply will fix you with some special black boxes. Scarlett and Snake Eyes will knock out the generator in the fort. Your objective is to clear the way for the secondary team that will actually storm the fort. So we have all of our G.I. Joe team being separated into different squads with their own missions to complete the operation. And we get our first appearance of Cobra Commander, as they show the only known photo of Cobra Commander at this point. And they discuss Barroness and how you should never turn your back on her unless she's dead. And even then, you should search her for grenades. Then Hawk is discussing, Dr. Burkhart, the reason for this operation. And Short Fuse kind of busts in saying, well, ain't she a traitor? Which leads to a pretty cool conversation about the role of soldiers. Hawk starts off, we each took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. That Constitution guarantees the right of every citizen to disagree with the government. And then Snake Eyes signals to Scarlett that wouldn't it just be easier to bomb the whole island? And Hawk gets a little upset. No, we're the good guys. Remember, the island has a civilian population. Besides, it's not our job to judge Dr. Burkhart. And somebody chimes in, what is our job? And this is one of those awesome panels here. We're soldiers. Our job is to follow orders, to do the impossible, and make it look easy. Very cool message there. Then we get an image of the island, and now we're in the Cobra viewpoint in the fort, as Cobra Commander and Barroness are having a conversation about Burkhart and how they have her restrained. And they're ready to go. They don't, at this point, I don't think they're afraid of much. And then Cobra Commander gets word that the Joes have been spotted on the radar. There's a submarine on the surface 20 miles north of the island. And Cobra Commander isn't too upset about this. Excellent. And he dispatches 2 heavy weapons teams to the North Beach. And then on their way, they can stop at the fishing village to carry out the contingency plan. And this kind of sets the tone for the character of Cobra Commander here. My dear Dr. Burkhart, you will soon see the distinct advantages of having no scruples whatsoever. And we have the Joes approaching the beach, and everyone's kind of starting to have some of their character show with the bubblegum and relaxing and having their different jobs. But the heavy weapons team for Cobra is entrenched and ready to go. But before they can, they say a rocket of some kind has been shot off. Well, it's Stalker with a rocket pack that flies over and starts bombing the hell out of them and blowing them all away. And has them on the run. And then the Joes are able to land on the beach. And, they want to get into the jungle undercover. And once they do, they pull out their different operations and the team starts splitting up to go on their own separate missions. And here we have some of the Cobra, the heavy weapons troopers that were on the beach coming back reporting in that they were outgunned by G.I. Joe and completely caught off guard and surprised. And Cobra Commander mentions that he's not surprised, or his only surprise is that they've lived at all. And Barroness here is pleading for them to just kill the doctor and be done with it. They don't need this. But Cobra Commander starts kind of laying the groundwork that there's a bigger plan at play here. No, my good Barroness, that's exactly what they want us to do. This initial landing is a feint, to draw my troops away from the fort so that they can set up a heavy assault which will land on a closer beach. So he's already, in his mind, outthinking the G.I. Joes. And he begins to show off the full battalion and all the tanks and heavy weaponry and explain that they're all going to keep it all within the fort and they're not going to run out and be separated and be able to be picked off. So then we have Breaker coming over here with Flash to cut off the, or tap into the lead from the radar so that they can have an all-clear signal broadcast to the fort at all times. And they cut through the conduit that the wires are in, and they discuss that. And of course, we have to use a laser rifle to do it because we don't have a can opener or any other tools that they mentioned. And Stalker, or not Stalker, Scarlett and Snake Eyes are climbing into the fort, and they have spotted Burkhart, and they begin making their way in. And the rest of the crew is out at the airfield, and they begin, just kind of spotting out the airfield and discussing that. And then we go back to the Pentagon to see the general is talking about how the operation is going and how it's a diversion for a bigger assault on the fort, exactly as Cobra Commander expected. And we get a little picture of all the top secret files of all the Joe team, which is kind of neat. And they have the hydrofoil that they're going to send out to lay the attack on the fort. And then we have Short Fuse and Stalker and the guys at the airstrip, and they begin bombing the airstrip and destroying all the planes. I think they're supposed to leave one plane intact, so I think that's down here where they do. But the Cobra troopers were all like fake dummies, and it was a dummy plane, and Cobra had allowed them to do it. But the Joes don't know that at this point. Then back in the fort, we have Scarlett and Snake Eyes making their way through, and Snake Eyes at this point is just very much commando Snake Eyes, not really showing off any ninja skills at this point. But they are slowly making their way through the fort, sneaking in, trying to get to the point where they can get Dr. Burkhart. And then the other Joes, or the two Joe teams that are outside the fort, meet up and are near the fishing village. But they mentioned the airstrip has been neutralized and the radar is under control. They've both accomplished their parts of the mission and they're continuing on. And Barroness here, Commander, they've already destroyed the airstrip, and yet you still refuse to kill the hostage. If you have a master plan, I demand to be informed of it. Patience, Barroness. So then we have Dr. Burkhart here attempting to sacrifice herself, telling Cobra Commander to just get it over with. Go ahead and kill her. She's not going to talk to anybody anyway. And then Cobra Commander is informed that the gijoe heavy assault team has landed on the beach. So we get the rest of the team here rolling in, ready to back up the initial crew. And kind of similar to the cover here, we have the Joes riding the tank in and going over the walls and barriers and chasing Cobra troopers away. Rock and roll on his motorcycle, jumping over things. Then inside the fort, we have Snake Eyes tossing a grenade and taking out the generators. And Cobra Commander finally, Barroness, I believe it's time to fill you in on the game plan. And Barroness asking, do you plan on killing Burkhart now? No, Dr. Burkhart is due at the airfield. Have a staff car and escort her to transport her. So then we see the car flying out of the fort with Dr. Burkhart in the back. Just as the Joes arrive at the fishing village and see that all the civilians that were in the fishing village have been killed, this is the heavy assault team that Cobra sent with his contingency plan on the way to the beach. They went through and murdered everybody that was in the fishing village. And the Joes debate, whether they should stop and bury the bodies, because that would be the decent thing to do. But they have this ambush to set up that they need to get to. So they move along and set up their ambush, and a column of Cobra tanks come right down the road as they expected, and they're able to take them out with the ambush they set up with the tank and the laser. And I think Rock and Roll here takes his motorcycle through the jungle and starts taking out the troops. And Dr. Burkhart's path goes through the village as well, just as the Joes are doing all this. And Stalker, with his rocket pack, flies in to take out Dr. Burkhart in a car. So he grabs her, and it's revealed that it was the Barroness the whole time, that Dr. Burkhart is still in the fort with Cobra Commander. And he begins to reveal a little bit more of his plan. As he's using Dr. Burkhart to draw the G.I. Joe team into a trap. And he's about to put on his special combat helmet for the first time. And he mentions once the entire G.I. Joe team is in the castle, then he will use the explosives that he has set and the timer on his wrist to blow up the entire fort while the G.I. Joe's in it, taking out the G.I. Joe team. So this whole ruse was less of a kidnapping of Dr. Burkhart, for means of getting information, but more of using her to draw the G.I. Joe team in and destroy the G.I. Joe team was Cobra Commander's initial plan. So then the heavy ground assault team pulls up to the fort and is trying to get in. And Scarlett and Snake Eyes are making their way through the fort and have come to the room that Cobra Commander and Burkhart are in. And we have a showdown here within the command center with Cobra Commander with his battle helmet on now, and Burkhart, and the battle going on the outside as they're trying to get in and back them up. The Cobra Commander drops down a 12-inch thick door, locking Scarlett and Snake Eyes into this room and separating them from the rest of the G.I. Joe team. And they're traveling through the fort looking for the other guy, Scarlett and Snake Eyes, and know that there is a steel door upstairs that needs to be cut through somehow to get in there. Cobra Commander, with his hostage, has the two Joes there drop their weapons, and everything is working perfectly. He tells them that the timer he's setting on his wrist will unlock the door in 5 minutes. But Burkhart yells out, "No, that's actually a bomb. He's going to kill us all, or kill you all." And Scarlett pulls off one of her throwing stars off her glove. Nice nod to the action figure that had the stars on there. Kind of letting you know those weren't just design on the glove, but were actually weapons. So during this scuffle, Cobra Commander shoots Dr. Burkhart. And then in response, Scarlett throws one of her stars and hits him in the wrist. Just as the Joe team blows through the steel door, so they come into the scene with Burkhart, who was shot in the arm, and Scarlett and Snake Eyes are trying to get her away to safety, the original part of the mission. And then Burkhart kind of tells more information about the timer and that they're all in danger and this fort's about to explode. And the Joes are like, well, we'll just get Cobra Commander to stop it. And they turn around and he's gone. And they see the little pool of blood into a hidden passageway that Cobra Commander must have snuck out. So the Joes get Burkhart and everybody else into the Cobra chopper to take off out of the fort before it blows up. And they take off. And the fort explodes, as Cobra Commander said it would. And they all look down and they're mourning over their vehicles that have all been destroyed, but are assured that, General Austin will take care of us and get us some new weapons. It's fine. And Dr. Burkhart here, I'd like to thank you all again. I still feel that all of my political actions were justified, but at least I now know that somewhere in the Pentagon there are people who care. So kind of backtracking on her aggressive, negative tone towards soldiers in general in the Army. And here at the airfield on the island, we get to see that Barroness and Cobra Commander escape in a plane, where he explains that Barroness will have to fly because his hand is injured, and they're going to go back to their true headquarters. So this island was all just, wasn't their headquarters. It was all just a trap to get G.I. Joe. And that is the end of the first adventure of the G.I. Joe team. Cobra had this quite elaborate plan through this whole thing of getting Joe onto the fort and blowing up the fort, with their only goal being to take out G.I. Joe. Kind of shows that the madman side of Cobra Commander, and that he's willing to let his troops die, and he wiped out that entire fishing village. He doesn't, not too concerned about civilians or his own troops or anything other than achieving his own agenda. Yeah, so with each issue that we go through, I want to pick out my favorite panel and kind of discuss that. But in this first issue, right out the bat, I'm going to go ahead and break my own rules And my favorite panel of the story is not a panel at all, but is the cover. This cover, more than any other, I think, in the line, really, has become iconic as, it's the first, but it also, has that shelf appeal. Like, you see this on a shelf, you want to pick it up, you want to know more about it. And it kind of draws you in, and you ask more questions, which is, what a cover should do. And I love it. I think it's really great. Another panel that I would say, an honorary mention, is Hawk discussing the role of soldiers, and mentioned here, we're soldiers. Our job is to follow orders, to do the impossible, and make it look easy. I think that's pretty badass, too, and kind of sets the tone for not only a soldier's role, but the G.I. Joe soldier's role, as they're the elite of all soldiers. Also, with each issue, I'm going to do a rating. On this one, I'm going to rate this between 1 and 5 Flagg points. And for this first story, I'm going to give it 4.5 Flagg points. I think this is a great first issue. It establishes the world, all the characters, the team. Lets us know what we're going to be in for. Introduces Cobra and how evil they are and powerful they are. And really sets everything up to where, you want to continue on with this group. You want to know more about these characters. So, that is my score. 4.5 Flagg points for issue 1. And I think we have talked about issue 1 enough, and now you know, and knowing is half the battle. So subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video, where we will dive into issue number 2 of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero.
You've been watching A Real American Brian production in association with the letters G, I, and JOE.